the clean thinking,
clean language.
Clean language.
So clean language is a system of questions to dialogue with the subconscious.
Okay.
So essentially, the subconscious is it's an ever-present field, right? And everything we're saying and everything we're thinking is the surface of our consciousness.
Right.
But it comes from a place that's a little deeper, right? Which we call the subconscious.
Yeah.
And we tend to operate in habitual patterns, right? We tend to think the same thoughts, we tend to...
We get patterns and we're...
But those patterns are a narrow selection of our potential. That is, the patterns are seated on something larger.
Okay, yeah.
And so when we come out of thinking, by
repetition, not repetition,
but
by habits.
Our usual habits tend to be repetitive and and compulsive.
Uh-huh.
But we have potential for much more sophisticated and insightful ways of processing and thinking, right? And one of the ways we access that deeper field is very simple. It's essentially by asking it questions.
Okay.
Right? By asking ourselves a question and having the attitude of receptivity, that is allowing ourselves, a moment's stillness to receive the answer, then something inevitably answers, right? There's been some research that has been done that when we're asked a question, it sends a kind of probe.
Okay.
Right? And the probe seeks an answer and will not stop until it finds some kind of answer.
Right.
Right?
Okay.
And you'll feel that if someone asks you a question, any question of any kind.
Yeah, you need to answer.
We have to answer it in some way. Something in us is, it's like we're manipulated by the question. It's like it takes us, right? Even if it's as simple as, what time is it?
Right.
If you ask people on the street what time it is, they,
right.
Unless they're a complete total asshole, right? They will try everything in their power to try to answer your question.
I saw a study of people that were homeless.
Yeah.
Well, it's a study of saying, like, instead of asking for change right now, you ask the time, and then people they're gonna, because that's
engaged. They connect. Yeah.
It's like a micro commitment.
Yeah.
So they're like, oh yeah, time is easy, and after, do you have change?
Right.
And then it just like bumps up the degree of money that they make, like,
really?
Significantly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It makes sense, right?
Yeah,
it's like
sure.
You're going to play in their habits.
So
that's the killer businessman talk.
There we go. Let's get him out. Get to know him. He's got a purpose to serve.
Yeah.
So essentially, that's the first principle of clean language, is that
questioning.
It's inquiry, essentially.
Right.
There are entire yogic spiritual traditions based entirely on asking questions, right?
Okay.
Called Jnana Yogas, Jnana.
Okay.
Jnana Yogas, which is the yoga of inquiry, the yoga of knowledge. And a practitioner will ask himself essentially for 20 years one question, right? It might be something like, who am I? Right?
Oh, yeah.
And if you ask yourself at any one moment, who am I? A certain kind of answer comes up.
Definitely.
Right? And then you take that and you receive that answer, and then you ask it again. And then essentially you peel the layers.
You peel it off,
and deeper until you come to the essential core. Who am I really?
Right.
But you have to get through the core. You don't go from the first question to the core, right? It's like you're peeling an onion. The first question will just give you to the first layer.
Surface level.
And then you peel that off, and then you ask the question again, and then you go deeper. Repeating the question takes us deeper.
Right.
Another similar question for the Jnana Yogas is, where are you going? Where are you going?
Right.
And you can ask yourself that at any part of the day. You're waking up in the morning and you see yourself
I'm going there, or
where am I going?
Like metaphysically, or like very
exactly.
literally, like I'm going
both.
to get a coffee. Or
exactly. But where's going to get a coffee taking me? There's a Zen saying that says, if you don't pay attention to where you're going, you're going to end up where you're going.
Right.
Something like that.
Yeah.
If you don't pay attention, you're going to end up where you are going.
Right.
Right. I love that saying. Right? Because it's valuable to ask ourselves, where am I going? Where are you going with this podcast?
Definitely.
It's taking you somewhere. Every decision we make is part of a bigger journey.
Yeah, but you see, for like, if you want to talk about the podcast real quick, it's in a creative matter.
Yeah.
That I'm doing this to like magnify basically where I'm going.
Yeah. The podcast is offering
it's a search.
Possibilities ahead of you.
Right, yeah.
And these are attractive to you.
Right.
And that's why it's
valuable.
Curiosity.
It's where am I going? Well, yeah, right now this is really helping my curiosity. trying to spark stuff up and generate
great
movement.
Cool.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. No,
I mean, I was using it as an example.
I know, but
great.
I decided to answer. Sorry.
Right. Of course.
So yeah, so probe.
Yeah, exactly. Probe. So in questions, probe the unknown field and allow the unknown to become known.
Right.
And so then you want to learn to ask questions, the right questions or valuable questions to get, because each question will direct attention into a certain direction.
Yeah.
Right. A question directs attention.
Right.
And then the attention then will generate, information.
Right.
So the clean language system is essentially a set of questions that are called clean because they are weeded out of the tendency to speak and perceive through assumptions, right? When you speak,
I got you.
I hear through my filters,
right,
and I respond to you through my filters.
Yeah.
I'm not responding to what you've said. I'm responding to what I've imagined you've said.
Right.
Right? I've created a little bubble, cartoon bubble.
Yeah.
Right?
That's what...
And you've said something, and then...
You decrypt it the way that your filters do it.
And that's right. So, two people, if another person was here, they would hear a different thing. And
okay, yeah.
And so when I'm going to ask you a question, it's going to be tainted with my planet, my world, my inner life. And so then when I ask a regular normal question, I'm going to be leading a certain way, leading you.
Definitely.
Because it's going to...
Are you talking in the clean or like in your normal filter behavior, basically?
Yeah. So the clean is an attempt to cancel out
you don't like that, do you?
What?
No, but
Oh, exactly. Yeah,
like
exactly.
that question.
That's a perfect example.
Like you don't like that, do you? And you're like, what?
What if I loved it? I cannot like it.
Right.
I can't say that I like
screwed.
it.
You've been put
I'm in a corner. Yeah,
Oh.
exactly. Yeah. That's a good one. I should use that one. You don't like that, do you?
Yeah.
Oh no, of course not.
Maybe, I don't know. Like what?
Shit, now I hate myself because I actually like it.
I kind of wanted to like it. Yeah. So
yeah. So
there's a set of questions basically that are and who came up with that?
Well, that's a good question because it's worth mentioning.
Is it a clean question? Who came up with it?
Who came up with it? Yeah, that's
cool.
pretty clean. Yeah.
Yes. All right. Good. Feeling proud.
I mean, it's simple and direct, A guy called David Grove.
David Grove?
Yes, he was from New Zealand.
Okay.
He was half Maori.
Okay.
And he lived in the US for a while, and he was a therapist. And he was extremely gifted, and he was studying, of course, the processes of his clients, but also the works of some of the great therapists like Virginia Satir and others. And he noticed that when the therapist modulated the language of the client, they modified their experience in certain ways. They took something away from their experience. So he learned to really respect and utilize the precise words of the client.
Okay.
Because the words have internal references.
Yeah.
And associations that are unique to the client.
Right.
And so there's a certain kind of power in using their own words. And when the person was really going deeply within, they tended to speak in symbols and metaphors. And he found then by addressing the metaphors directly, then they began to offer some very interesting insight and information that were the keys to the transformative process of the client.
Okay.
And little by little, he started to refine his language so that it became more and more clean.
Faster.
Not faster, more direct and more clean.
Okay.
So using less of his own internal associations, using less of his own internal symbols, and really engaging the inner world of the client.
Okay.
Right? And so what happens when we hear a clean question, right? Normally when we hear a normal question, we have the question, but we have the questioner along with the question.
Right.
The question is an intermix. It's like the separating the dancer from the dance.
Right.
You can't. It's not something you can do. Right. So you have the question, and inside the questioner, the person who is asking the question.
Right. There's like a certain gravitas. There's like.
And so we're in relationship not only with the question, but the person.
The question, yeah.
When we hear a clean question, it's only a question. There isn't the other there. And so...
Did you clean question me just before?
I was clean questioning you,
Nice.
yeah. And so what happens is when you hear a clean question, the other is not there, so there's only you.
Right.
And so your own inner life becomes more vivid and more apparent. And so you have the more capacity to make these discoveries. Right? So one of the examples that people often give, because it's a simple one, and we tend to use it. If you see someone going through something, let's say you see someone and they're making a face, and you see something is going on.
Okay.
And you want to know what's going on.
Yeah.
So you ask them, hey, what are you thinking about right now?
Right.
Then where's that question going to take them? What are you thinking about right now?
But probably like, well, I saw your face because you were making a face.
Yeah.
And then it kind of went to negative pretty fast.
Okay.
Like it wasn't like what am I thinking about? Like probably with a face also, you're like, it just doubles it. Was that?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever answer comes to you, it's like there's no right or wrong answer.
Oh, or what I'm thinking about right now.
But let's say if I ask you the question, what are you thinking about? Where does it bring your attention to? It brings it to what you're thinking about.
To what I'm thinking about. Yeah, definitely.
But let's say in that moment you weren't thinking.
Now I need to think about something.
Now you're going to start thinking.
Yeah.
So it's a leading question.
Right.
It sounds like an open question, but it's a leading question because it leads you to think if you were not busy thinking at that moment.
Right. There's already a presupposition that
exactly.
you're doing something.
Yes. Presupposition.
Right.
If I ask you instead, well, what are you feeling right now?
Well, then same thing. I need to feel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You need to feel. You need to go into... So the clean question to resolve that particular situation, if you see someone, is what's happening right now?
What up?
So if I ask you now this question, where does your attention go? What's happening right now?
I guess it's more global. I can feel, or I can think, or I can
Exactly.
I can
You can find out what's happening right now.
I can hum a song. I can do whatever. Like
absolutely, you're completely free and open to respond in whichever way that reflects your experience at that moment.
So by having that as a therapist, I understand it so that since you're not leading, you're getting cleaner questions. You're getting a person that you're not influencing their own inner sanctum or whatnot.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Is there and I guess as if you're a businessman or if you're a person that deals with a lot of with people, sometimes it's really hard to really understand the other person.
Right.
To have like a communication that is not filled with a lot of mines or spikes or whatever, and by having clean questions, basically that's like a system to help you have the reality or as much real reality as you can. Would that be? Do you do training for businessmen also, or like mainly for therapists?
I mean, it's a good question. I mean, it can be used, and people use it in all sorts of contexts, right? People have applied it in incredibly various different places.
Okay.
Right. There was a story about this is a true story about a police standoff, right, where there was a hostage situation.
Really?
And this detective used clean language, and he managed to subdue and bring the tension down in the situation.
Wow. Well, I can understand why, because you're like, what do you want?
Exactly.
In a clean way, so then you understand what the person wants
exactly.
for real,
and you can
then you can manage or negotiate on the good stance, on the place that you're supposed to negotiate.
So it can be used in lots of different ways. I mean, I definitely mainly teach it for people that are doing either hypnosis or coaching or therapeutic work.
Right.
But then it can be applied in whichever way a person feels inclined to use it. In interpersonal relationships or in different situations or in an interview process. I know someone who teaches or offers, clean interviewing.
Okay.
So there is a presupposition behind the system, and that is that we fundamentally don't understand each other when we speak.
I think that's a fairly good presupposition.
Right. But it's not one we operate by when we communicate. When we use language, we operate by the presupposition that we do understand each other.
That everybody understands.
Yes, that I understand the words that you use, that is the meanings that you're inflecting, I get them.
Right.
But it's a mistake.
It is.
Because the words you're using have internal references that are unique to you.
Right.
I have a broad sense of it, but it's very easy to start to assume a certain meaning of a certain word, and then walk down this path, and then suddenly realize, wait a second, we're not in the same place.
Right.
Because we're misunderstanding the fundamental meaning of a word. That's why big philosophical discussions will always start with a definition of terms.
To really
make sure that people
this is here, this
means this means this means.
Right. Yeah.
Do you know how many times you get into a big ass discussion, even argument with someone?
Right.
But you actually share the same.
I get
beliefs.
that all the time. I get that all the time.
It's just because you're each associating
just
meaning behind words that
right.
and that is slightly different.
Right. It's like, well, or like what I get is like, I don't know. Like it really depends on where we put that definition of that word, right?
Right, exactly.
And then the person, oh, you don't know what? You don't know, and you're like, no, let's define that word first,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
after let's see.
That's
how
wise to engage in proper dialogue, to
right.
to make sure that you have the same understandings or more or less of the same words.
Right. Yeah.
But so that's the presupposition of clean, is that we don't really understand, and so because you don't understand, you inquire about it.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna just this week or last week I helped a friend. Like he was doing a kitchen. He's got a few employees, and he was like, nobody is listening to me. And I was like, well, maybe it's the way that you explain yourself. Like it could be, a road that you can go and observe to see if like because there's two. There's the listener, and there's you that talks. And he said, no, I said what I said was the best way and the simplest way to say something. And you're like, well, if nobody can hear you.
Right.
When you're saying it that way,
right.
maybe it's not the best. Maybe it's the simplest way in your mind.
Yeah.
But then, we're dealing with a lot of different minds and different cultures, different everything around.
Yeah.
Sorry, it was my little...
absolutely.
Because it's really punched on, like, good communication for him to be, like... I'm sure him going to, like, a little clean seminar or whatnot, it would, like...
Yeah,
it would cut at least 25% of the weird communication that people can't understand what he's saying.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you know that you don't understand what a person is saying, and you accept that, then you're more inclined to try to find out what they're saying. And so you can use clean language questions to find out more about what they've just said.
Right.
Right? So let's say, I ask you, hey, what's happening right now? And then you might answer, oh, I feel like
I'm doing a good job at editing this video live.
Okay.
That's exactly. So I'm sorry, but I'm still with you. I'm like 95% with you.
Okay. And so 5%. You feel like you're doing a good job of editing this video live.
Yes.
Right? Now I think I know what that means. But no, if I stop and I examine a moment, there's a few things that I might not really know. Right? I feel like I'm doing a good job.
Right.
Right? What kind of good job?
Why is it a job? No.
Oh, sure. What kind of good?
Right.
Do you know? And then you can tell me more about good.
Right.
Right. I could assume that I know what good means, but really, all I'm doing is referring my own internalized understanding of good. But it might be valuable for me to find out about your good.
What's your good? Yeah.
What's your good? What kind of good is that good? And so that's one of the most important clean language questions. What kind of that is that?
What kind of good in what context? Right.
Well, depends. In this particular context here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
In this context, because this good is not the same as, like for me, this good is not the same as the good when I'm feeling good. It's completely different. It's
right, exactly.
Now it's a good in an action.
Right.
So yeah, I understand. After, like, okay, so that's one part, I guess.
Yeah.
And after, is there clean language also? Like is there?
I mean,
is there clear output? Because that sounds like clear input.
Right. Well, that's mostly how it's. I mean. It's not your usual dialogue because it really is directed towards the person who's receiving the questions, right? There's one person asking the questions and then one person who's essentially exploring where the questions are taking him.
Right.
Right. And so really the focus is on the person who is receiving the questions, right? And
the person, when you're saying the person that's receiving the question, you're saying like
he's the star of the show at that moment. He's everybody's
like the person that's being asked the question.
Yeah,
like let's say my good is now the star of the show.
Yeah,
no, but
exactly.
Let's say okay,
Like let's say there's a young couple and they're excited to meet each other. You know, they have stars in their eyes and butterflies in their stomach, and they go for a walk, and then one of them, the guy, decides to use clean language to get to know the girl, which is great. Clean language will really help him get to know the girl,
Right.
and especially it'll help the girl get to know herself in that exchange. However, the girl will not get to know the guy.
Okay, got it.
Right?
Yeah.
In fact, she won't know anything about him.
Right.
Right? Because the attention is directed, because he doesn't exist. And that in the clean process,
Yeah.
the asker ceases to be a certain way. He's just
Yeah.
he's just a quality of presence.
Actually, I did that a long time ago. A long time ago. I read How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, right? One of the biggest classic of like self-motivation books.
Yeah.
And there was one thing about asking questions. So I just asked questions all night long.
Okay.
I was in a party, I just asked questions.
Okay.
And people, I like cats or whatnot. And you're like, oh, why do you like cats? And I just continued the conversation all night long, just asking questions. At the end,
Interesting.
At the end of the
You won many friends and influenced people?
two people came to see me after, during the party, and they said, oh, but you're just like me. You are just like me. And I was like, why do you think that?
Right.
And I continued the questions.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Interesting.
Oh, very
Yeah.
much so.
Well, they were projecting, because they were having an experience of themselves in your presence.
They were having the most awesome experience.
Yeah.
Because I was there, but they were like it's kind of fun to talk about yourself. You kind of know it. It's like it's a safe place where you can explore and be like, oh yeah, I really like this.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was asking positive questions also. So yeah,
Cool.
Yeah. So makes sense to. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, right?
Right. So I will often use the clean language process in hypnosis as well, right? Or doing,
Totally.
or
Totally
doing the
makes
dream
sense.
work,
Right.
right? Because then it allows me to stay clean. That is, I don't interfere with the person's system,
Right.
and all this really rich and valuable information comes up.
And after, do you go to an extent of using the same words as that person is using, to induce?
Yeah, I will use every word that they say,
Right.
And I mean, depending on how clean the session will be. But if I'm going to stay in the clean system, every word I say will be from them.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, except for the clean questions, of course. But
Right.
they're pretty neutral, right? There's
Nice.
that's why they're clean.
And you were telling me before the podcast that you were doing a seminar pretty soon.
Yeah,
about that?
I'm doing a full training, a 4-day training. It's gonna be 3 days in January and 1 day in February, and I think it's the second or third weekend. I think it's the third weekend. I don't remember the dates, but
Okay.
yeah, and it's really.
And how is it like most of the time? Is it like a full 8 hour? Like what's because you've been doing like a lot of different workshops of nidra and then hypnosis.
Yeah.
And you're doing the clean thing. How basically what is the format and like what do people can?
Yeah, I think we begin at 9 or 9:30, and we go until 4:30, and I'll share with them the principles, and then pretty quickly get them into practicing. I introduce the questions gradually.
Okay.
Right, because each question has its own kind of character, and directs and brings forth certain kinds of information or content. So you really need to get familiar with
the way that you
the action
question?
The action of each question. It's like each question has a life of its own. If I ask you what kind of good is that, or if I ask you where and when there's good, whereabouts is good, it takes you to a different place.
Yeah.
Right. And both of them are open in that you have permission to be in relationship with your experience.
And what about your intonations?
Well, intonations,
Because that's another ballgame where you're like,
Yeah.
what kind of good is that? You're trying to give a good, or else you're like, oh, what kind of good is that?
yes,
Like
that's good observation. I will try to use the same intonation as the client, but a little bit slower.
okay.
Right? I'll try to slow them down a little bit so that they can start to internalize a little more. Right?
Yeah, and feel safe.
Because the inner world is slower in the sense that we're in motion in our patterns, and they function in time, and so by slowing down, then we have more room to to make these discoveries.
Right.
Right.
Right. Like in dreams, right? Like we're in an alpha state or whatnot, and after like it goes.
Yeah, it'll go deeper and deeper. Yeah. So in the clean process, people will naturally go into a conversational trance.
Right.
Meaning
that's what I felt.
Yeah. You mentioned it. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. So I think it's time to
wrap up.
To wrap up. I mean,
Okay.
we can continue.
No,